This is Martin. He is the lowest rated chess bot on chess.com and a common target of harassment, intimidation, and bullying. However, this month, chess.com decided to give Martin a glow up, and he is now GigaChad Martin, rated 3000 ELO, and in this video, he decided to challenge Stockfish to a duel. And the following game is wild. In this game, Martin had the white pieces and Stockfish had the black pieces. And another thing is that I'm hiding the eval bar purposefully so you can focus on this game and not be distracted by Stockfish giving feedback on its own game against a 3000 ELO GigaChad Martin bot. So the game began with d4, pawn to d4, followed by knight to f6. We have a Nimzo Indian on the board, and this opening is quite popular among the world's elite and actually was seen recently in the candidates tournament on the women's side. We have pawn to e3 and castles, bishop to d3, d5, knight to f3, and pawn takes c4. And all of this has been played before. It's all theory, and we have bishop takes, pawn to c5, and now black's idea is to try to pressure white's center, which is quite big right now. So black's goal is to break up the center and not let white have all the domination in the center. We have castles, pawn takes, and now white has an isolated queen's pawn, which will likely be a weakness if this game goes into an endgame. We have pawn to b6, preparing a bishop fianchetto. And now we have pawn to a3, asking this bishop a few questions. What are you going to do? Are you going to take me? And Stockfish decides to take the knight, which leaves an isolated pawn here on a3, and now this pawn isn't isolated anymore, but you'll soon see that Stockfish has a few tricks up its sleeve. And now Stockfish plays queen to c7, skewering the bishop and this pawn, and if you move the bishop, then this pawn will fall, and Stockfish will be up a pawn, which is always bad, because if you're playing against Stockfish, and Stockfish is up a pawn, Stockfish will likely convert the game. So here Martin Bot plays bishop to b5. And some of you might be wondering why Martin didn't play queen to b3. But right here, the engine line is that you go bishop to b7, pressuring the knight. And now this bishop is forced to retreat. And now you just develop this knight. And this queen is kind of misplaced. The queen is not staring anywhere. This bishop is passive. And overall, Stockfish still has a lead here. So Martin's idea is to gambit this pawn. So after a6, forcing the bishop to move back, you gambit this pawn for some activity. So you first attack the queen, and then you attack the queen again. And the queen has been forced back to her home square. And as you can also see, Stockfish has 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, 2 minor pieces and 2 major pieces on their home squares. But Stockfish is also quite solid here. These pawns are all quite solid. These 2 pawns are also quite solid. While for Martin, this d pawn is isolated and weak, and this a pawn will also be a target soon, likely. So we have knight to e5, jumping the knight into the center. Bishop to b7, finally fianchettoing the bishop onto a more active diagonal. Bishop to b4, now attacking this rook. And as you can see here, it's still white. It's still Martin who has the initiative. So after the rook moves out of the way, we have bishop to h5, now pressuring the f7 square. And Stockfish finds the only move, which is g6, forcing the bishop to move back. We have knight to d5 by Stockfish, moving the knight to a very active square and pressuring this bishop. Queen to b3. And now Stockfish has seamlessly developed all of its pieces. Now this knight has been developed, challenging this powerful knight, which has an outpost on e5. And the bishop is supporting this knight, so this is a master class on how to develop your pieces while remaining your advantage up a pawn. So here, Martin plays knight to c4, not wanting to trade the knight. We have knight to f6, and now this knight has rotated from b8 all the way to f6. We have pawn to h3, b5, now pressuring this knight, forcing the knight to move. The knight jumps to d6, attacking the bishop, and we have rook defending the bishop. And this position might look a bit scary if you're playing from the black side, but really there's nothing here. Although there is a discovery on the rook, and it might look a bit nasty, and black might look a bit cramped, but really there's nothing. If you move the knight here, that's just a blunder, because you can just take the knight. And if you try to take the rook, Stockfish will gain 2 minor pieces for a rook, which is better. And white's position is still kind of bad. Whoops. You don't take with a knight, you take with the queen. Because if you take with a knight, you blunder a bishop. But anyway, this position has nothing to fear from the black side. So this is why Martin plays rook to e1, and now the king moves up to g7. Then we have queen to b2, rook to d7. Now black has a threat. Black can take the knight, and then after bishop takes, the queen takes the bishop, and black gains 2 minor pieces for a rook, which I stated before is better for black. We have knight takes b7. Seeing this threat, Martin neutralizes it. Rook takes, and still, although Stockfish is up a pawn, we have all these pins. But really, Stockfish has nothing to fear, as this knight can't really be challenged. And these rooks will just move out of the way. So we have rook to c6, knight takes b4, pawn takes. We have rook to a7, sidestepping the 2-rook skewer or pin. And we have rook to c1. The other knight jumps to d5. The first knight was unfortunately killed. We have bishop takes, pawn takes, and now this is liquidated into an endgame, with Stockfish having 2 rooks and a queen, and Martin also having 2 rooks and a queen, but Stockfish is up a pawn. Although its pieces are kind of cramped. We have queen here, setting up this powerful gun formation. Rook here, trying to trade off pieces, because if you're up a pawn, and you have a winning endgame, trade off all your pieces so you can promote one of your pawns. So right here, now white has a pass pawn here, but black also has a pass pawn, and this pawn will be quite a bit of trouble for Martin's position. So it advances, and Stockfish puts the rook behind the pawn. We have both the kings walking up, and now Martin decides to attack this pawn, which is backwards, and Stockfish defends it. We have rook up, and now Stockfish pushes the pawns on the king side. Martin strikes back, and now we have this formation. But it is white who is down a pawn, and white to move, so white has to concede something. And now another pair of pawns is traded. But as you can see here, Martin is walking into Stockfish's territory. While Stockfish has 2 passed pawns here, Martin will soon have 2 passed pawns there. And now it is a race to see which pawns promote first. And that will decide the game. We have b4 by Stockfish, rook here, and now a5. And these pawns, as you can see, are a bit closer than Martin's pawns. And Martin gives a check, another check, and now tries to target these pawns. Stockfish defends, and now Martin tries to allow its pawns to promote. But Stockfish is getting there closer and closer. We have both these pawns on the 3rd rank, advancing towards queening, whilst Martin only has this pawn. Martin gives a check, Stockfish moves out of the way, and Martin is 1 step closer to promoting. But Stockfish comes in clutch with the rook, and the rook can stop this pawn. And the difference here is that these 2 pawns are connected and can protect each other, but this pawn is blocked by the king and cannot protect this pawn. If this pawn was, say, like here, that would be a different story. But this is why Martin is in a bit of trouble. We have rook here. And now Martin promotes. And right here, Martin is up 8 points of material. So that's quite impressive against Stockfish. We have a trade. The rook sacrifices for the pawn. But the problem is that these two pawns are just way too close, and Martin cannot stop them in time. Martin tries, but Stockfish promotes into a queen, and now Martin is unfortunately dead lost. It was a good run, and Martin was in a very close endgame with Stockfish, but still his pawns cannot promote as fast as Stockfish's. We have rook here, and now the rook gives itself up for the final pawn. And now Stockfish just slowly and methodically corners Martin and checkmates Martin, unfortunately. And Martin's king moved all the way here to there. So this was clearly a vast improvement for Martin. He has grown from 250 ELO all the way to 3000 ELO. He just faced the world's most supreme chess computer, and he almost defeated it. Almost. It was very close. But unfortunately, Stockfish has shown that it still remains the most powerful chess computer in the world, and no one can challenge its superiority.